Alright guys, Red here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Robert Space Industries Constellation series. We're going to be comparing all its variants and seeing some of their strengths and weaknesses and doing a little tour/review along the way. RSI was responsible for the development of the quantum drive that ushered in the colonisation of the galaxy. The quantum drive technology was immediately recognised around the world, and exploration missions were suddenly feasible as piloted vessels could now push further into the solar system. Various states, called countries at the time, that previously couldn't afford space travel were suddenly able to embark on missions of their own. The Astro Development team of RSI were responsible for designing and manufacturing small civilian-focused spacecraft. This included the Aurora and Constellation lines. It is the team most aligned to the company's original vision of affordable spacecraft. All ship lines designed by the ADT are distant ancestors of the original Zeus. The Constellation ships are a series of multi-crew fighters. Each constellation has its own primary focus, ranging from exploration to transport. Each variant, at its core, is highly capable and very useful in most roles around the verse. On top of that, has a reasonably unique extra twist that sets it apart from its other variants. The variants are the Andromeda, the Aquila, the Phoenix and the Taurus. There is also the Phoenix Emerald, and this is a limited version that is sold around St. Patrick's Day, or the Fortuna Festival as it's called in the verse. Basically it just comes with a green paint job, so there's no point in covering it here. So with all the lore and stuff out the way, let's get down to the hangar and review some ships. And this is the Constellation Andromeda. We will treat this as a default version, so unless I explicitly say otherwise, all other versions are going to be the exact same. So let's talk about the similarities. With the exception of the Aquila, they all have this angular open cockpit design on the bow. Other than that, and the length of the Taurus, the profile of all the ships is mostly the same on all versions. They have a manned turret on the top and the bottom, with two size 2 guns on each, and these weapons can be swapped out. However, one of the turrets on the Aquila and the Taurus do have different functionality, which we'll touch on later. All variants have 4 size 5 hardpoints as well, allowing the Constellation to possess significant firepower. However, 2 of these are locked to size 4 gimbals, which does reduce the overall damage output, but they can be fitted with whatever weapon you choose. The missile loadout for each varies depending on the version, but the Andromeda is the highest and packs 28 size 1 missile slots and 24 size 2, which is insane basically. And this kind of constitutes the Andromeda's unique selling point. These missile pods are size locked, so can't be changed, as they are part of the ship design, but obviously they can be loaded with the missile type of your choice, as long as it's a match in size. Every version also has a rather spacious cargo or vehicle transport bay. They can all hold 96 SCU of cargo and boast an internal inventory space of the same size, with the exception of the Taurus, which can hold significantly more, but with less internal inventory for some reason. The Andromeda can apparently also dump its cargo if the need arises. However, I've tested this and I can't get it to work on any versions at all. So that's a bit of a letdown, and I'm guessing that's just not a thing at the moment. Apart from the Taurus, they also all come with a snub fighter, which can be docked and undocked from the rear of the ship. The Andromeda comes with the Kruger P-52 Merlin, which is a very fast and capable little fighter, but it has no quantum drive of its own. As for the Constellation's internal component sizes, they are all identical. 2 size 2 coolers, 2 size 2 power plants, a size 2 quantum drive, and a size 3 shield generator. The armour health pool is the same for both the Aquila and the Andromeda, which both come out at the top of the stack. The Phoenix is below them, and then the Taurus comes in last with the least survivability, but generally they are all still pretty tanky. I would recommend that you check that though, depending on when you watch this, as this may have changed. The description for most of these ships say they come with a snub and a rover. In reality, if they are bought in the game, they do not come with a rover, and that will have to be purchased separately. The snub is standard though, and will be there again every time you need to perform an insurance claim. On the inside, the variants all mostly look the same, the Phoenix being the glaring exception to that, which we'll see later. The ship is split into 5 sections. Starting from the back, we have the snub hangar where you can enter the fighter. This seems to be working pretty well in 3.19, and I definitely had a lot of fun testing this out. The snubs are definitely one of the coolest features about the Constellation ships, and there is no other ship in the game with this dedicated deployable light fighter setup going on. From there we have this small section where some components are stored. The components aren't accessible as of 3.19, but that may have to change pretty soon for engineering coming in. Then we have the main hangar, where anything up to the size of an Ursa will fit, so no tanks or ballistas etc, but definitely anything smaller, all the tumbril vehicles, a rock DS, will fit in here no problem. The missile storage is also here, and visible, which is a cool little feature. There's also 2 side docking ports in this room for easy extravehicular activity access. It can be pretty dark in here, especially if the ship isn't powered on. Apart from that though, it's a very functional aesthetic, not one I'm entirely fond of. Hopefully it'll all get a nice polished pass at some point. We could be doing with some light switches in here for example. In front of that we have the habitation area, with 4 crew beds that also double as life pods when that functionality eventually comes online. I have a couple of weapons racks and some lockers as well, and there's a toilet here at the end. Toilet, shower, combo, maybe. On the other side we've got a seating area with a table that's supposed to pop up, but it doesn't currently. We also have the crew lift in this area. That will take you down to the ground. And there's also a docking port in the ceiling as well, that I've completely forgotten to show. Then last but not least we have the cockpit area, where you have access to both the upper and lower man turret. When the turrets aren't active, they are retracted and then covered with a blast shield, which is pretty cool. The design of these turrets does seem a bit dated now though, and could be doing with a little overhaul. But I mean, turret is turret, right? Still shoots stuff, still does the job. Coming around to the front, there's 1 pilot chair and 2 co-pilot chairs. The cockpit itself is pretty open, but does seem impeded by these rather large struts everywhere. Apart from that, the MFD layout is really nice and easy to access, with 7 MFDs there, although some of them are a wee bit on the small side. Taken off, we have a pretty cool landing gear animation that's always intrigued me for some reason, with its almost tank track-like design that slides aft as the gear retracts. We can now see the blast shields for the man turrets opening up as well as all the side hatches in the cargo bay and the lift. Very, very cool. We have some nice VTOLs that pop open down the flanks, making this one of my favourite ships for all the animated little functions that it has. As well as that, there are missile arms that pop out from the sides to bear the Andromeda's teeth. It really is pretty cool stuff, and it's easy to see why this ship is so popular. The description for the Andromeda reads: the Constellation Andromeda, a multi-person freighter, is the most popular ship in RSI's current production array. The Constellations are beloved by smugglers and merchants alike because they are modular, high-powered, and just downright iconic looking. So the main differences on the Andromeda basically all come down to the preposterous amount of missile damage and overall firepower it can bring to bear. Even without adding to that 2 active man turrets, the Andromeda is a very formidable combat ship which could easily do extreme risk bounty missions. In terms of what you would use this version for, the answer would be pretty much everything. The only things you couldn't use it for is salvaging and mining. But even then, it would serve well as a support ship for those roles, either as direct security or transport for the final commodity, or even as a logistical backup for storing mining heads, prospector bags, ship guns that you've stripped, etc. You maybe would be hesitant to use it for PvP, as the lighter fighters would just run circles around you, although if you add in both man turrets you might be able to pull something off. Other than that, unless you're up against a ship in a similar weight class, I can't see it ending well. But for everything else it's practically perfect, especially when you add in the ground vehicle and the snub. If you want to land outside turret range at a security outpost and go in with the mule and clean the place out, you're covered. Say you want to fly the Snub up to Jump Town and try and pirate a ship full of drugs, then fly it back to unload it into your cargo hold, again, you're covered. This is possibly the most versatile ship in the game, but although it's working now, that Snub dock doesn't have the greatest reputation, so keep that in mind. Next up is the Aquila. As you can see, this version has a completely different cockpit window on the front, which is definitely an upgrade over the other versions and provides a much better panoramic view. The only other differences are subtle and unfortunately not very useful or aren't currently implemented. It has the same armour rating as the Andromeda, so is tied top and comes with the P52 Merlin stub. If purchased with real cash, it also comes with the Ursa Rover. It has the same weapons loadout as the Andromeda with 4 size 5 hardpoints, with 2 of them locked to size 4 gimbal. It does have less missile capacity, but it can still fire 24 size 2s. The top turret of this model is touted as an advanced sensor suite that has a complement of scanning and comm technologies, including a long range scanner. I've no idea what the comm tech is supposed to mean, but I've tested the long range scanner in game and I'm afraid it just doesn't function. The rocket arms from the Andromeda are now scanning antennae, which is pretty cool, although they don't pop out as far as I can tell. Apart from that, this is the fastest of all the variants and has a hydrogen tank that is almost double what the others have. There is no bonus for quantum fuel, however. Mentioned in the specs is the ability to detect jump points, which refers to the jumps between star systems that is also currently not implemented. Its description reads, "Explore any distant horizons." The Constellation Aquila features a redesigned cockpit for maximum visibility, advanced sensors and an onboard Ursa rover for planetary exploration. Let's see what's out there. The cockpit is definitely a lot nicer too, with less intrusions to the field of view. In terms of specific usage, not much really. Obviously it can do all the things that the Andromeda can do, with the small deficiency in its overall damage output, but the other features don't seem ready to provide much of an advantage. The cockpit window though is nothing to be sniffed at, and I know a lot of pilots prefer this version simply for that alone. This will definitely become one of the more interesting versions when all its features come online, and the long range scanning and massive fuel tank will definitely go a long way to provide some very cool options for players who like to stay out in the black. Next up is the Taurus. Definitely one of my favourites. As you can see, we're back in the old cockpit version, which isn't a great start. Guns are the same, and we're on the same 24 size 2 missile loadout as the Aquila. Other than that, the Snub is missing and being replaced with extra cargo space, which is supposed to be shielded from scanners. I've tested this extensively however, and as far as I can figure out, this function does not work at all. The bottom turret is also not a weapon turret, but instead is a tractor turret for loading and unloading cargo. However, that feature is not yet implemented either. There is also the ability to eject cargo if it's of an unstable nature, for example, but again, you guessed it, it's not implemented. The main difference, however, is the whopping 174 SCU of cargo the Taurus can hold, and likewise the amount of vehicles and bikes that can be crammed in. Still no tanks or ballista-sized objects, but definitely more of everything. The Taurus is also longer as well, and you can see the length the landing gear has to travel has changed quite a bit. The description reads, "Enjoy the adventure of a multi-crew Constellation on a budget." The Constellation Taurus is a dedicated freighter, fully configurable but without all the bells and whistles. The Taurus is a great way to get started with crewed ships. Usage cases for this is the same as the other two, minus the versatility of having the Snub as an option, but the cargo capacity is definitely a more realistic size for any serious hauling ambitions you might have. As well as that, being able to load an extra few vehicles may come in handy for any expeditions. Maybe you're planning a race or a battle, etc. It also means that you can have a vehicle and still shift a reasonable amount of cargo from salvage you come across perhaps. To be honest, if I had to choose, I'd probably take the Taurus out of the bunch for plain functionality reasons. The extra missiles on the Andromeda are good as well, but having more space just comes in handy more often. Again, the interior is pretty much the same, with the exception that the loading bay is more stretched and the back room now has a cargo grid. Last but definitely not least, we have the Phoenix. There's just something about this one. From the outside she looks pretty much the same. The standard white paint is definitely a looker though, plus the side docking ports have been swapped out and replaced with windows that run the length of the entire cabin. The main weapons are the same as the others, 4 size 5 with 2 locked into size 4 gimbals. The missile loadout however has changed to 28 size 1s, which means it will use the pop-out arms that the Andromeda has. It has the same 96 SCU of cargo and internal storage. It also comes with a P72 Archimedes snub instead of a Merlin, which is definitely an upgrade. We'll go over the snubs in a bit more detail later on. If you pay for the Phoenix with real money, it comes with the Lynx Rover, which is a more luxury version of the Ursa. However, the ship is on sale very rarely, and even then it sells out in seconds, so I wish you all the best of luck there if that is to be your goal. Inside, the cargo bay is different in that it's wider slightly overall and the roof is lower. There is also an elevator instead of the normal ladders. You can still store the same vehicles you normally would in here though, and might be able to fit something slightly wider if it ever comes along. If you've never seen inside the Phoenix, then you're in for a bit of a shock here. In fact, let's just suspend that for a tiny bit longer and start at the back of the ship. The rest of the ship is business as usual. You have access to the Archimedes at the back. By the way, all of these docks can support both the Merlin and the Archimedes. You can switch them out if you like. Then coming forward there is the shielded storage area which isn't implemented, with some component housing as well. And then you come to what is quite likely the main draw for the Phoenix. As you come into the main cabin, you aren't greeted with the normal RSI functional aesthetic. Instead, you're treated to a wood panel floor trimmed with flush metal. Smooth lines and lots of space, likely increased from the massive windows. There's some component storage here and there, then what is apparently supposed to be a hot tub that again isn't implemented. Some more component housing. I'm guessing that's the controls for the tub opening. There's a few of these aquariums with no fish in them, little model wrecks at the bottom of the sea there, which is a cool little touch. Over here we have the lift access, which has a nice wood panel on it, so it blends in with the floor. This opens up the master bedroom, which is pretty Spartan, but it does have that nice window there. And mirrored glass by the looks of it. Back out here there's a dining area with another massive viewing window. And then this beautiful fully stocked bar at the back with neon signs. You might recognise this, as it's the set for the Inside Star Citizen shows on YouTube from Disco Lando and the team. None of this stuff is drinkable, by the way. There's also a nice skylight that runs across the roof as well, but I'm an idiot and forgot to look up again. Then coming over to the other side we have a seating area that looks very luxurious and very first class. A bit further down we have 2 single rooms that are again a bit bare, but they do have a 0 fish tank each, and the rest of the ship just goes back to being the same as the other models. The description reads, "A dedicated luxury spacecraft for the discerning star captain. The Constellation Phoenix can be operated as an organisation command ship and features a luxurious redesigned interior. In terms of what you'd use this for, of course it does pretty much everything the rest can do. It's clearly designed for passenger missions of some sort, but again, not implemented yet. So in the meantime, it's just the very much more pleasing to the eye version of the Constellation series. There's a weird, hard to pin down feeling that comes with the luxury ships in this game. I guess it's probably just the illusion of opulence, or the closest most of us will really likely ever get to owning a luxury yacht basically. I don't know. It's just cool as hell is the bottom line. No point in over analysis, just enables the ability to go around the verse, stacking paper in style. And who doesn't like that? In terms of manoeuvrability, the Constellation is not the greatest, to be honest. I mean, it's a pretty big ship, and it does struggle to get its nose around. Even against other ships in its class, its pitch and yaw speed are comparatively slow. Slower than the 400i, 600i, Corsair, Freelancer and Mercury, for example. However, its health pool is massive compared to those other ships. It's almost double the nearest competitor, which is the 600i. This might change when new damage models come into the game, but as of 3.19 the Constellation remains the best tank in the sky. Just a quick look at the stats between variants. The Constellation and Andromeda are tied at the top with 181,344 health points. Then comes the Phoenix at 161,000, followed up last by the Taurus with 131,000. SCM speed, which is your combat speed, is all the same apart from the Aquila, which is only slightly ahead. The Aquila again is the fastest and all the rest are the same. It's on 988 and the others are on 911. All the pitches are the same, all the yaws are the same, and all the rolls are the same. You can see here the advantage the Aquila has in terms of hydrogen capacity. Apart from that, everything else is exactly the same. For PvE bounties, you could solo all the way up to extreme risk targets with this ship. In fact, as the AI and stability of the game improves, it might be the little guys with the faster flyers that give you the most trouble. But you could always just barrage them with missiles when you first come within range. Either way, you have the shields and hull to hold them off for long enough to get the few shots in that you need. Against a hammerhead or an Idris, it definitely takes a fair bit of work, and you will definitely have to keep moving. But even with 4 gimbaled size 4s on the hardpoints, you're going to chew through eventually. For PvP, this isn't really a PvP ship, let's be honest. Unless of course the target is a similarly large ship. Even with 2-man turrets, your main objective against a skilled light fighter pilot is going to be defensively retreating. However, if you have the crew, then undocking the snub fighter would absolutely give you an edge. But the Merlin alone would probably get his ass kicked, so you definitely want to stay within range of you and the turrets for backup. Best case scenario would be to support a larger PvP fleet battle because of the armour, missile loadout and large hardpoints, but only if winged with light fighter protection. The Rovers that come with it, if you buy it, I'll cover really quick, as they don't really apply to a lot of people. Basically, if you have the Ursa, then it has some seats and some room for cargo. It also has a pilot controlled weapon that can deploy, pretty sturdy little bugger as well. If you have the Lynx, it looks nice, it performs well, there's nothing to complain about. A luxury rover basically. It still has a pilot controlled weapon and seats in the back, but no room for dedicated cargo boxes. It is however a wee bit quicker, but a bit less armoured. This is definitely the one I would go for if I was just cruising around looking to explore some stuff in style. We really need to talk about the Snubs as well, quickly, as they are quite different from each other in a lot of ways. Let's take the P-52 Merlin to begin with. It has 2 size 1 gimbaled hardpoints and 1 size 2 Tiger Strike ballistic Gatling, which can't be swapped out. It also has no quantum drive. If you want a racer for in-atmosphere, this is probably considered the best or one of the best. If we compare it to the P-72, that has 4 sized 1 gimbaled, and obviously again no quantum drive. However, the P-72 is very lightweight and almost unflyable in atmosphere. However, it is the best zero-G racer in the game, so, you know, depending on where you are and what you're doing, will decide what you want to have docked. Overall, I've got to say, I really love the Constellation series. Personally, I tend to have a preference for ships that perform well in multi-role scenarios, and the Constellation is probably the greatest Swiss Army knife in the game. The only ship that even scratches it would be the Corsair, which has more firepower but less than half the health. The key to the Constellation being that no matter what you're doing, it's backed up with serious firepower, should it all go sideways. So say for example you want to salvage expensive materials, or pirate them, or transport expensive materials from a refinery. This is the ship for the job. Or if your job entails any kind of ground vehicle based journey, or ground based journey plus the need for some cargo space on top of that. It's definitely a ship that I rely on a lot, I've noticed. When you open up the ASOP and go, right, what ship would be good for this? 9 times out of 10, a Constellation fits the bill nicely. It's really nice to fly, and the weight seems to translate nicely into the flight model. The sound is well suited and deep, and the mechanical animations are on point as usual, even for a ship that's been in the game this long. If I had to choose one model to use as the most all-round, I'd take the Taurus. You're not going to miss that second turret if you're flying around solo mostly anyways, and the use cases for undocking the snub are fairly limited. If you know what you're primarily going to be doing in any given patch, then sure, it might be a good idea going with another variant. For example, if you're doing a lot of bounties, then the Andromeda would be best suited. If you're doing a lot of exploring, then the Phoenix would be a cool way to see the verse. I personally have never understood the draw with the Aquila, to be honest. It's all about the cockpit, I guess, which is really nice, no doubt about it. Maybe when more star systems come into the game, it will become a very useful tool. But with no boost to quantum fuel capacity, I don't really get the point. Price to performance, I'd say the Andromeda and Taurus are well worth it when compared to other ships of similar value and use. The Corsair would have less cargo but more weapons. The Origin ships are just too expensive. The Freelancers are just not on the same page for protected cargo running. The Mercury is a bit too expensive for what it does. Plus the weapons aren't there. So yeah, I would give the Andromeda a 9 and the Taurus a solid 8 out of 10. The other two would be around a 7 for the Aquila and 6 for the Phoenix. Simply based on price and game and what they can do for that money. The last two still do everything the other two do, but the other two do a little more and are cheaper. For a loadout, again, due to things not being entirely implemented, I'd just go for straight military grade build. There is no need for that though, and you could run power and cooling from stock no problem if you wanted to save some money. Obviously, you're going to want an XL1 quantum drive in there and an FR86 size 3 shields. The reason I recommend military is the components can take more damage. That will change however with the introduction of engineering, so make sure to check that to be sure. And that's it, all the constellations compared and reviewed to the best of my humble knowledge. Hope that was useful to someone. Remember to like and subscribe. Remember there's a Patreon. 07 guys.